I had just signed the papers for the kind of home I once thought belonged only in glossy magazines or distant dreams, a white stone villa tucked behind iron gates on the edge of Lake Travis outside Austin, Texas, with glass walls that caught the morning light and an open patio where I imagined sipping coffee while sketching designs for my clients. I was 29, an interior designer who had worked double shifts for a decade, saving every spare dollar skipping vacations, even living in a cramped studio while my friends posted pictures of cruises and resorts. Every sacrifice had led to this moment. The keys warm in my palm, the air smelling of cedar and fresh paint, the realization that I had built something on my own terms. For the first time in my life, I felt I had crossed into a chapter where dignity, independence, and peace were no longer negotiable. But that fragile moment of triumph lasted less than 20 minutes. My phone buzzed in my back pocket with the name I dreaded most flashing on the screen: Melissa, my older sister. My hand trembled as I answered because history had taught me her calls never meant congratulations. "Good," she said, not even waiting for me to greet her. Her voice was clipped, commanding the same tone she used when she wanted money or favors. "We're 15 people. We'll be there in 40 minutes. Get the rooms ready." I froze by the wide kitchen island, staring at the polished marble I had chosen myself, the kind of surface I once cut photos of from catalogs and taped to my vision board. Did I hear her correctly? "Melissa, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice catching. She laughed sharp, like glass cracking. "Don't play dumb. We saw your pictures. That villa is huge, way too big for just you. Family comes first. My friends and I need a place for the summer, and you're not going to say no after everything I've done for you." My stomach twisted. Everything she had done for me. Memories crashed down the loans I had covered when she maxed out her credit cards, the tuition I had chipped in for the dresses she sold from my closet without asking. Still, she painted herself as my benefactor. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, thinking maybe she was joking. Maybe she had had too many drinks. But her tone hardened. "This is happening. If you think you're going to live like some queen in that empty palace while I struggle, you're wrong. Get towels ready, and don't embarrass me in front of my guests." Behind her words, I could hear laughter male voices, the hiss of a beer can opening. She was already with them celebrating their free vacation at my expense. My hand went clammy. I looked out at the infinity pool reflecting the sky, the oak trees swaying gently, the dream I had built with blood and bone. And in that silence, a realization struck me like a slap. My sister did not see me as a person with boundaries or rights. She saw me as a resource to be mined, a doormat to be stepped on, a younger sibling whose success belonged to her by default. My heart pounded. My triumph had been hijacked before I could even taste it. "Melissa," I whispered, trying to steady my breath. "You can't just show up with strangers. This is my house." Her response was a sneer I could almost see curling her lips. "You wouldn't dare stop me. You owe me. Remember who babysat you when Mom was too tired. Remember who let you borrow her prom shoes. Don't forget. Without me, you'd be nothing." The words burned. In the cavernous silence of my villa, her voice sounded louder, uglier, invading every corner like mold spreading across white walls. I gripped the counter to keep from shaking. My first night in my new home, and already the walls felt tainted. In that moment, I understood this was not just about a house. It was about 10 years of sacrifice, about a lifetime of being told to give way to make room to silence my own needs so hers could be louder. And now she was coming, a caravan of entitlement rolling toward me. The dream of peace had turned into the threat of invasion. And I knew, with icy clarity, that if I surrendered this time, Melissa didn't congratulate me. She didn't ask how I was settling into the house or whether I needed help unpacking. Her first words were an order, a decree, as if she were announcing to her court that the servants should prepare her chambers. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the wide marble counter gleaming, still smelling faintly of new construction, and listened to my sister dismantle the very meaning of my independence. She claimed this villa as though it were hers by right, her voice echoing with entitlement I had heard all my life, but never so sharp, never so brazen. "You owe me, Emily," she said flatly, and the phrase wasn't new, but this time it carried the weight of an army of strangers I had never invited. I swallowed, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. "Owe you for what?" My voice cracked between disbelief and fury. She scoffed. "For everything. For the times I watched you while Mom worked late. For the times I drove you to school. For the sacrifices I made so you could get ahead. Don't act like you forgot." Her rewriting of history was breathtaking. I remembered those nights differently. I remembered her yelling at me to make her snacks, to clean up the messes she left, to sit silently while she had her boyfriend over in our shared room. I remembered being the one working at a diner at 16 to help pay bills while she maxed out her first credit card on designer handbags. Yet here she was repackaging neglect and selfishness as if they were noble acts. And her voice only grew firmer, like a general issuing commands. "You have 6 bedrooms, we'll take 4. You can keep 2. That's fair." My jaw clenched. The gall of her math, my blood boiled at how she could stand on the phone dictating how my house would be divided like war spoils. Behind her, I heard more laughter, male voices joking, one of them yelling, "Tell your sister we'll need more beer." They were already treating my villa as theirs. I walked slowly to the glass wall overlooking the pool, the lake glimmering beyond, and pressed my forehead against the cool pane. The calm landscape outside mocked the chaos pouring into my ear. My dream home was already tainted, invaded before they even set foot inside. Melissa's tone shifted then from commanding to mocking. "Honestly, Emily, don't embarrass me. You've always been the quiet one, the obedient one. Don't start thinking you're better than family just because you got lucky with a house. This is ours too. Blood is blood." That sentence hit me harder than any insult. Blood is blood. It was her shield, her excuse, her eternal trump card. She had used it to get money, to get favors, to guilt me into silence when she wanted more than her share of anything. And for years I had caved because what else could I do? Our parents reinforced it. They always said, "Be nice to your sister. She has it harder," or "Don't make a scene. Emily, just give in." I had internalized it, built my life around it until now. My chest tightened. I realized she had no intention of asking, no intention of respecting me. This wasn't a request, it was a hostile takeover dressed as family duty. She was already rehearsing her justifications, layering lies over the past, painting herself as a martyr. And if I let her in even for a weekend, she would never leave. The villa would become her stage, her playground, her proof that she still held power over me. My phone buzzed again, texts flooding in. Photos of Melissa's friends, selfies in a car with champagne bottles, captions like, "Lake Travis, here we come," and "Thanks, Emily," as though I had agreed, as though my permission was irrelevant. My knees weakened. They were 30 minutes away, and they believed the villa was theirs. I stared at the photos my name dragged through their celebration without my consent, and I felt the old panic rise, the panic of being cornered, of having no choice. But beneath the panic was something else, a burn in my chest, a defiance that had been building quietly all these years. Melissa's entitlement wasn't just annoying, it was theft exploitation, a violation of everything I had built. For the first time in my life, the thought came sharp and clear. I don't owe her anything. Not anymore. And that realization changed everything. As I stood there clutching the phone, my mind began to rewind through the years like an old film reel. Melissa's words, "You owe me," dragged me back into every chapter where I had been the one to clean up her chaos while she strutted off with a smile. I was 18 when I got my first job at a roadside diner, the kind where the grease clung to your clothes and your feet ached long after closing. I was still in high school, balancing calculus homework and late-night shifts, while Melissa was 22 and already drowning in debt. She had maxed out her first credit card on handbags and parties, and I remember our mother pressing my hand, whispering, "Be kind to your sister, she's under pressure. If you could help just a little." That little became everything. I handed over half my paycheck money I had planned for college application fees to cover the minimum payment on her card. She didn't even thank me. She said, "It's the least you can do." Then came her tuition fiasco. Melissa enrolled in community college, determined, she said, to be the first in our family to get a degree. But she skipped classes, spent her financial aid check on a trip to Cancun, and when the bills came due, she turned to me again. I was 19, working at a furniture store by day, waitressing by night. I scraped together the money thinking, Maybe this time she'll try harder. Maybe she'll change. Instead, she dropped out after one semester, shrugging college isn't for me. My savings evaporated and her life continued as though nothing had happened. There was the time of her wedding, too. She had met a man named Brian, and within months they announced their engagement. Our parents beamed, though they knew Melissa had no steady job and Brian's credit score was in the gutter. "It will be fine," she insisted. "Emily will help." I was barely 21, still paying off my own student loans, but somehow I became the silent sponsor of her dream day. I worked every overtime shift I could, skipped meals, skipped outings with friends to afford the check I wrote to the caterer. The wedding went on as planned: white dress, champagne, toasts, rented ballroom. And when Melissa tossed the bouquet, she gave me a wink that said, "You did your part." Within a year, the marriage collapsed and she moved back into our parents' house, debt piled higher than before. Each memory was another cut, another piece of myself carved away in the name of family loyalty. When she couldn't pay rent, I wired money. When she overdrafted her account, I covered the fees. Once, when she wanted a designer coat for a job interview, she went into my closet and sold one of mine on Facebook Marketplace, then laughed when I found out. "You weren't wearing it," she said, as if that excused theft. And every time I raised a protest, my parents looked at me with disapproval. "Don't be dramatic, Emily," they said. "She's your sister. You'll understand when you're older." But I was old enough to know what fairness felt like, and I had never felt it from Melissa. The years blurred into a cycle. She asked, I gave. She took, I stayed silent. Meanwhile, I kept hustling. I earned scholarships, built a client list, designed modest apartments into homes people loved, all while dragging her weight like an anchor tied to my ankle. Sometimes late at night, I would cry quietly into my pillow, asking myself why I couldn't say no, why I kept letting her drain me. The answer was always the same, because I was taught that love meant sacrifice and that saying no meant betrayal. And now here I was, 29, holding the keys to a villa worth $2 million, proof that my sacrifices had not been in vain, that I had climbed despite the anchor. Yet Melissa's voice in my ear made it clear she had rewritten the story entirely. In her version, she was the reason I had survived the silent heroine behind my success. She had twisted babysitting into martyrdom, selfishness into sacrifice, entitlement into duty. And in that twisted story, the villa was hers to claim. My chest tightened as I remembered one more moment. I was 24, working on my first big interior design project, a restaurant downtown. I invited Melissa to see the finished space, hoping to share my pride. She walked through the door, glanced at the fixtures, and said, "It's nice, but don't get cocky. Remember who supported you." I had laughed nervously, then swallowing the sting. But the truth was, she had never supported me. It was always the other way around. Now, the phone felt heavy in my hand, as if it carried all those years of unbalanced scales. My sister's entitlement wasn't new. It was the same melody, just louder, sharper, dressed in the arrogance of adulthood. The villa wasn't the beginning of her invasion. It was simply the biggest stage yet for the same old performance, and I knew with a clarity that chilled me that if I didn't stop her here, she would rewrite my life entirely. Saturday morning sunlight poured across the patio, making the pool glitter like liquid silver. I should have been unpacking boxes and hanging curtains, but my hands trembled too much to hold a hammer or a screwdriver. Every sound made me flinch. A car backfiring down the road, the distant hum of a motorboat on the lake. Then, at exactly noon, a deep rumble rose in the distance. Tires crunched gravel, and when I stepped onto the balcony, I saw a rented party bus grinding up the hill toward my driveway, blasting music loud enough to rattle the glass doors. My stomach dropped. They had actually come. The bus hissed to a stop, and the doors opened. 15 people spilled out, dragging suitcases carrying coolers already in swimsuits and flip-flops. Melissa led them, striding like a queen, entering her estate, oversized sunglasses on her face and a cocktail in her hand. She didn't even glance up at me on the balcony. Instead, she threw her arms wide and shouted, "Welcome to our summer villa." The cheer that erupted from her friends pierced through me like knives. I rushed down the stairs and unlocked the front door before they could start pounding on it. Not because I wanted them inside, but because I couldn't stand the idea of them breaking it. Melissa pushed past me immediately. perfume and alcohol stinging my nose, heels clacking across the polished wood. Her friends followed, leaving wet footprints on the floor from their melting ice bags dragging rolling suitcases across the marble I had paid extra to protect. One man whistled as he gazed up at the vaulted ceiling. "Damn, Melissa, your sister's rich." "This is insane," she smirked. "I told you. Family takes care of family." I stood frozen by the door, my fingers gripping the handle so tightly it hurt. I wanted to scream to shove them back out, but my voice caught in my throat as they stormed through the house like it was an Airbnb they'd already paid for. Two girls ran upstairs squealing, calling dibs on the master bedroom. Someone else popped open a champagne bottle, the cork bouncing off the chandelier. The spray of fizz landed on my white sofa. Another wandered into my kitchen, yanking open the fridge I had stocked with groceries for the week. He grabbed a carton of eggs, muttering about breakfast tomorrow. Melissa sauntered over to the bar counter, set down her drink, and slipped off her sunglasses. Her eyes flicked over me with a smugness that made my skin crawl. "See, this is perfect. Everyone's happy. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Emily." I swallowed back bile. Harder than it has to be. This was already unbearable. The space that had felt like my sanctuary only hours ago now felt like a public train station. The scent of sunscreen and cheap liquor mixed with the cedar finish souring the air. My chest tightened as I watched strangers flop onto my leather chairs, turn on the big screen TV, and prop their sandy feet on the coffee table. "Melissa," I finally managed, voice shaking. "You can't just move in with 15 people. This is my house. I didn't agree to this." She tilted her head, her smile thin and sharp. "Correction, this is our family's house. You bought it, sure, but you wouldn't have made it here without me. Don't forget who raised you while Mom and Dad were too busy." She gestured around as if presenting evidence. "Besides, look at all this space. You're really going to be alone here." "That's pathetic. Houses like this are meant to be lived in, filled with laughter, not echoing with your silence." Her words twisted in my gut. Loneliness, yes, it was something I feared, something I had tried to drown in work for years. And she knew it. She was using it as a weapon, turning my vulnerability into justification for her invasion. Around us, her friends laughed, clinked glasses, argued about who got which room. The villa pulsed with their energy, their noise, their entitlement. I looked toward the pool, the sunlight reflecting in harsh flashes across the water. This was supposed to be my dream, my reward for years of sacrifice. Instead, it was being hijacked, transformed into a playground for people who hadn't lifted a finger for it. My throat burned. One of Melissa's friends marched down the hallway with my towels draped over her shoulders, shouting, "These are so soft! Perfect for the pool!" Another man opened the door to my office, the space I had carefully arranged with sketches pinned to corkboards, and called back, "Melissa, you can make this your closet. It's huge." Something snapped inside me. The invasion wasn't symbolic anymore. It was real, physical, tactile. My boundaries weren't being threatened. They were already being crossed, trampled, annihilated. And in that rising tide of chaos, one truth settled heavy and immovable in my chest. If I let them stay even for a night, I would lose everything this villa was meant to represent. I stepped into the center of the living room, my heart slamming against my ribs, and for the first time since they barged in, I raised my voice. "Stop!" The word echoed through the high ceiling, cutting through the laughter and chatter. Every head turned. Melissa froze mid-step, her sunglasses dangling from her fingers. A hush fell over the room, broken only by the faint fizz of an open champagne bottle on the counter. I drew in a breath, my chest tight but my stance steady. "This is my house," I said louder this time, each syllable clear, deliberate. "You are not welcome here." For a beat, no one spoke. Then Melissa let out a sharp laugh, one that sent heat rushing to my face. "You're joking," she said, her tone dripping disbelief. She looked around at her friends, inviting them to share the joke. "Did you hear that? She thinks she can throw us out. Emily, don't embarrass yourself." One of her friends smirked. "Come on, relax, it's just family. Stop being dramatic." My hands curled into fists. That word again, dramatic. As if protecting my home was a performance, as if standing up for myself was nothing but theater. I clenched my teeth. "I'm not joking. You all need to leave. Now!" Melissa's eyes narrowed, her smugness hardening into challenge. She walked toward me slowly, heels clicking against the wood floor and stopped inches from my face. Her perfume was suffocating. "You wouldn't dare call the cops," she whispered, her voice low, venomous. "You've never had the guts to stand up to me. You're still the little sister who does what she's told." I felt my pulse in my throat, a roaring in my ears, but I didn't step back. I stared into her eyes and saw the same manipulation, the same condescension I had endured for years. My voice wavered, but the words came anyway. "Watch me." The room erupted. Some of her friends laughed nervously, others muttered under their breath. Melissa straightened her expression, flashing with something I had never seen before, uncertainty. But she recovered quickly, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "You won't. You don't have the spine. You're pathetic hiding alone in this oversized house. Without us, you're nothing. You'll get bored of your silence in a week." Her words struck like arrows, but instead of piercing me, they seemed to bounce off. Because deep down I knew the truth. Silence was better than this noise. Solitude was better than exploitation. I had built this home to be my sanctuary, and I wasn't going to let her turn it into a circus. "Melissa," I said firmly, my voice steadier now, "I've spent my entire life giving in to you, paying your bills, covering your mistakes, staying quiet so you could take more. But it ends here. This house is mine. My name is on the deed. You can't rewrite that. Get out." Her jaw tightened, eyes flashing with fury. "You think you're better than me now?" she hissed. I shook my head slowly. "No, I just finally know my worth." The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. Melissa's friends shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other, sensing the tension building like a storm. One of the men muttered, "Maybe we should go." But Melissa shot him a glare that shut him up. She turned back to me, lips curling into a cruel smile. "You want to play this game, fine. But don't expect Mom and Dad to take your side. They'll see who the selfish one is." My chest tightened at the mention of our parents, the old wound reopening. For years, they had told me to yield, to give way, to be the good daughter. I could almost hear their voices scolding me for causing conflict. But another voice rose stronger inside me, now my own. If they think I'm selfish for protecting what I've earned, so be it. I'd rather be selfish than a doormat. Melissa's smile faltered. For once, my words had landed where her guilt could not shield her. She stepped back, her face reddening, her bravado cracking at the edges. And in that fragile pause, I knew I had taken the first step toward breaking the pattern that had chained me for so long. But the confrontation wasn't over. She wasn't the type to retreat quietly. I could see it in the way her fingers twitched, in the way her chest rose and fell too quickly. She was plotting her next move, already calculating how to regain control, and I braced myself because I knew this battle was only just beginning. The fragile pause after my words shattered within seconds. Melissa's cruel smile returned thinner, sharper, as though my defiance had only made her more determined. She turned on her heel and called out to the others. "Go upstairs, pick your rooms. Don't listen to her. She's bluffing." That command broke whatever dam of hesitation had existed. A chorus of footsteps thundered across the floorboards. Laughter and shrieks echoed up the staircase as her friends charged through the hallways like a pack of teenagers in a hotel. My heart raced as I heard doors slamming, drawers yanked open, closets rifled through. One girl came trotting down the stairs holding up my silk robe like a trophy. "This is gorgeous, I'm taking the master." "Sorry, Emily." She winked as if it were some harmless prank. I felt the burn of humiliation crawl up my neck. "Put that back," I snapped, but she was already gone, her laughter trailing behind. From the kitchen, another voice boomed. "Hey, Melissa, your sister's got a $200 bottle of wine in here." A man held it aloft, already fumbling with the corkscrew. My stomach dropped. That bottle had been a gift from a client, something I planned to save for a special night. "Don't you dare open that." I rushed forward, but before I could reach him, the cork popped with a loud crack. Foam spilled over his fingers. He grinned, pouring the ruby liquid into a line of mismatched glasses they had found in my cabinets. Melissa clapped her hands like a hostess. "Perfect, pour for everyone." I stood frozen, the smell of the wine filling the air, mingling with the chlorine drifting in from the pool. It wasn't just about the wine or the robe or the bedrooms. It was the totality of it, the complete disregard for me, for my voice, for my ownership. My sanctuary was being stripped of dignity before my eyes. Two men stomped into my office, the room I had set aside to design Sketch and Dream. "This is a sick setup," one of them said, tapping on my drafting table. He grabbed a handful of my sketches, flipping through them carelessly. "Melissa, you should totally use this room as a closet." Rage seared through me. Those sketches represented weeks of work, late nights bent over paper with ink-stained fingers. One wrong spill of wine or careless fold, and hours of effort would be destroyed. I lunged toward him, snatching the drawings from his hands. "Get out of here!" My voice cracked, but my eyes burned hot with fury. The man raised his eyebrows, mocking. "Relax, sweetheart, we're just looking." Melissa's voice cut through, commanding as ever. "Ignore her. She's always uptight." Then, turning back to me, she added, "You really think you can keep this whole place to yourself?" "That's selfish, Emily. You've never been good at sharing." The word selfish hit me like a slap. For years, that accusation had been weaponized against me, twisting every boundary I tried to set into an act of cruelty. But watching her friends invade every corner, hearing their laughter bounce off the walls, seeing them claim what I had built, it ignited something deeper. This wasn't selfishness. This was survival. I stumbled back into the living room, my pulse racing. Melissa leaned against the counter with a glass of my stolen wine, smirking. "Go ahead, call the cops if you want. See how it looks. Family dispute. They'll laugh you off the phone. And Mom and Dad, they'll say you're overreacting like always." Her words stung because they carried history. I could already hear our parents' voices telling me to calm down, to stop being dramatic. But then I looked at the chaos around me, shoes on my coffee table, wet swimsuits draped over my chairs, strangers rifling through my belongings. This was not overreaction. This was a violation. My phone lay on the counter where I had dropped it earlier. I reached for it slowly, my hand trembling but steady enough. Melissa watched me, amusement flickering across her face. Really, she mocked. "You're going to dial 911 on your own sister." I met her eyes, my thumb hovering over the screen. My voice came low, steady, a whisper that felt heavier than a shout. "Yes." She blinked, her smirk faltering. For the first time, uncertainty flashed in her eyes. Around us, the chatter died down, her friends catching the tension in the air. The music still played faintly from the bus outside, but in the villa, silence stretched taut. I pressed the numbers 911. The line rang. My heart thudded so loud it drowned out everything else. A calm voice answered 911. "What's your emergency?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight, and forced the words out. "I need police assistance. There are unauthorized intruders in my property." The operator's voice was steady. "Are you safe? Can you stay on the line until officers arrive?" I glanced at Melissa, at the wineglass frozen in her hand, at her friends shifting nervously. For once, I didn't feel small. I felt strong. "Yes," I said firmly. "I can." The operator's calm words still echoed in my ear when the distant wail of sirens broke through the lake air. At first, Melissa smirked as if she believed I was bluffing, that maybe I had just faked the call to scare her. But the moment the flashing red and blue lights splashed across the villa's white stone walls, her confidence cracked. She set her glass down a little too quickly, the stem clinking against the counter. The sirens grew louder until they cut off abruptly at the end of my driveway. 2 squad cars rolled to a stop, doors opening in unison. Officers stepped out, one male tall with a square jaw, the other female, her expression sharp, businesslike. Their radios crackled as they approached the front entrance. Every movement was measured, controlled, but their presence was undeniable, commanding. Melissa's friends began to panic. One of the men muttered, "She really called the cops." Another shoved his glass behind a pillow as though hiding evidence of trespassing would erase it. A girl whispered, "Melissa, what do we do?" Melissa raised her chin, trying to summon authority, but her voice came out thinner than usual. "Stay calm. They won't do anything. She's overreacting." A firm knock rattled the front door. I moved quickly, pulling it open. Relief washed through me at the sight of the uniforms. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. They entered without my permission. The male officer gave me a quick nod. "Ma'am, can we see proof of residence?" I had anticipated that. My heart pounded as I hurried to the drawer where I'd placed the closing documents just the day before. My hands shook as I handed over the deed and my driver's license. He studied them briefly, then looked back at me with a reassuring nod. "All right, this is your property." Melissa stepped forward, then trying to reclaim control. "Officer, this is ridiculous." ridiculous. I'm her sister. We're family. She's just being dramatic because she doesn't want company. She invited us." "That's a lie," I snapped, my voice rising before I could stop it. I pointed at the open bottles, the towels strewn across the floor, the robe tossed carelessly on the banister. They stormed in. They treated my house like a hotel. I told them to leave. They refused. The female officer turned her gaze on Melissa, her tone even but cutting. "Ma'am, family or not, if you are not on the deed and you were told to leave, you are trespassing. Do you understand?" Melissa's face went crimson. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "But she owes me. Everything she has is because of me." The words spilled out raw, desperate, louder than she intended. Her friends stared, some shifting, awkwardly embarrassed. One of the officers scribbled something in a notepad. The weight of silence after her outburst pressed on everyone. I steadied my breath, then said clearly, "I don't owe her anything. This house is mine, and I want them gone." The male officer gave a curt nod. "Understood. Folks, gather your belongings. You're leaving now." The group erupted in murmurs of protest. One man muttered about their wasted trip. A girl complained she'd already unpacked. Melissa, however, stayed rooted in place, her fists clenching and unclenching. "You can't do this," she hissed at me, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Mom and Dad will never forgive you." For a moment, old fear tugged at me, the memory of years of scolding, of being told I was selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. But then I met the officer's steady gaze, the certainty in his tone, and I realized something powerful. This wasn't just about family anymore. It was about law, about justice, about my right to boundaries. The officers began ushering her friends out one by one. Suitcases rolled across the floor, doors slammed as they retrieved their belongings from upstairs. Melissa lingered, trying to stall, whispering to each of them, "Don't worry, she'll regret this." But the officers were firm. "Ma'am, it's time to go. Now." She finally moved toward the door, but not without a final glare in my direction. "You think you've won?" she spat. "But this isn't over." I stood taller, clutching the documents in my hand like a shield. For the first time, I didn't shrink under her words. "It's over for tonight," I replied evenly. The officers escorted the last of them out the party bus, roaring back to life as it pulled away from my driveway. I watched from the threshold, the air suddenly quieter, cleaner. The villa stood still again, the only sounds the chirping of cicadas and the faint lap of water from the pool. The female officer handed me a card. "If they come back or harass you, call us immediately. You did the right thing." I nodded, the weight of her words sinking into me. The right thing. For years, I had questioned whether standing up to Melissa would make me the villain in my family's story. But here tonight, the law had sided with me. My boundaries were not selfish. They were valid. As the squad cars rolled away, the flashing lights fading into the distance, I stood in the doorway of my villa, my chest rising and falling with something unfamiliar. Not fear, not guilt, but relief. The heavy oak door shut behind the last of them, but the echo of their footsteps and bitter words lingered like a stain. For a few moments I just stood there, my back pressed against the door, breathing hard, listening to the sudden absence of chaos. It was almost too quiet after hours of invasion. I could hear my own pulse, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ripple of the pool outside. Peace should have rushed back, but instead, a hollow ache sat in my chest. Through the frosted glass panels, I saw shadows moving on the driveway. Melissa and her entourage weren't gone yet. They loitered, dragging their luggage, muttering curses that carried in the still night air. And then I realized my neighbors had noticed. Porch lights flicked on up and down the road. Curtains twitched. A couple across the street stepped outside with their dog staring openly. Phones were raised, little glowing rectangles capturing the scene. Melissa's voice rose high-pitched and furious. "She betrayed me, her own sister." She paced near the bus, gesturing wildly, her words slicing through the night. "We just wanted to spend time together and she called the cops." "Who does that to family?" Her friends murmured agreement, but their voices were tired now, uncertain, embarrassed. One girl muttered, "This wasn't worth it." Another shoved her suitcase into the bus, not meeting Melissa's eyes. The party bus driver leaned against the hood, smoking, shaking his head. "Lady, I don't care about your drama," he said, loud enough for me to hear. "My job's just to take you back." A ripple of laughter rose from a group of neighbors gathered near the end of my driveway. They weren't laughing with Melissa, they were laughing at her. The humiliation on her face was unmistakable. She spun, scanning the street, noticing the phones, the eyes, the judgment. For the first time, her arrogance faltered. Inside my villa, I watched from the window, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to shrink back, hide from the spectacle. But another part of me, the part that had been silent too long, felt a strange satisfaction. For years, Melissa had painted me as the weak one, the selfish one, the dramatic little sister. Now, the entire neighborhood saw the truth. She was the invader, the entitled queen with no throne. One of her friends shouted, "Melissa, let's just go." "This is embarrassing," she snapped back. "Shut up," but her voice cracked. The bus engine rumbled to life, headlights flooding the driveway. One by one, her friends climbed aboard, their earlier excitement drained into exhaustion and resentment. Melissa was the last to move. She turned back toward the villa, her sunglasses perched on top of her head, now her eyes gleaming with something between rage and desperation. She shouted, "You'll regret this, Emily. You'll regret being alone in that big empty house." Her words echoed, bouncing off the stone walls, but they sounded weaker than before, more like a curse than a command. Neighbors whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads. A woman in a bathrobe muttered, "Good for her," finally stood up for herself. I swallowed hard, pressing my palm against the glass. Alone. Yes, Melissa had tried to weaponize that word to make solitude sound like punishment. But as the bus pulled away, dust swirling under its tires, I felt the first threads of freedom tighten around me. I wasn't alone, I was safe. And for the first time, safe felt better than loved. My phone buzzed on this counter. Dozens of notifications, texts from Melissa, all caps, "You humiliated me. You'll pay for this, Mom will hear about it." Then social media alerts. My neighbors had already posted clips, Melissa screaming in the driveway, her friends dragging luggage, the flashing police lights. By midnight, the videos had spread through local community groups. Comments poured in, "Entitled family tries to crash sister's villa." Good for her for calling the cops. I scrolled slowly, my throat tight. Strangers were on my side. Strangers understood what my family never had, that boundaries were not betrayal, that protecting myself wasn't cruelty. Still, my body shook as I moved through the house, surveying the aftermath. Wine stains on the counter, towels damp and crumpled. My robe tossed carelessly across the stairs. Each object was evidence of their invasion, but instead of despair, I felt a grim kind of proof. This wasn't exaggeration. This wasn't drama. Anyone could see it now. When I finally collapsed into a chair by the window, the street was dark again. The neighbors had retreated indoors, the bus gone, silence restored. I sipped water, my throat raw, my body aching with exhaustion. Melissa's words echoed in my head. "You'll regret being alone." But as I looked out at the still pool, the stars mirrored in its surface, I whispered back, "Better alone than exploited." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the glass walls, but instead of warmth, it felt like exposure, as if the house itself wanted me to confront everything that had happened. I wandered barefoot across the cold marble floor, taking in the traces of last night's invasion. A half-empty wineglass perched on the counter. Damp towels were slumped in a heap near the patio door. A faint ring from a wet champagne bottle stained the coffee table. It wasn't just mess. It was evidence of how far Melissa had gone, how much she had disregarded me. I gathered the towels, dropped them into the laundry basket, wiped down the counters. With each action, I felt myself reclaiming the villa inch by inch. But beneath that small victory, an ache spread in my chest. The house was quiet, too quiet. Melissa's parting words came back to me. "You'll regret being alone in that big, empty house." Alone. That word had haunted me for years. I sank into one of the leather chairs in the living room, staring out at the infinity pool that blended into Lake Travis beyond. The water was still glassy, reflecting the pale sky. I should have felt triumphant. I had protected what was mine, drawn a boundary I had never dared to draw before. Yet guilt gnawed at me like an old habit. My parents' voices echoed in memory. "Don't be selfish, Emily. Don't cause conflict. Be the good sister." I could almost hear my father sighing, my mother scolding. They would never understand why I had called the police. To them, family unity mattered more than fairness, even if that unity crushed me. My phone buzzed. Messages from Mom and Dad glared on the screen. "We saw what happened. Was it necessary?" "She's your sister." My chest tightened. Even now, with video proof plastered across social media, they still painted me as the problem. I typed and deleted a dozen replies, then finally set the phone face down. No explanation would satisfy them. They weren't looking for truth, they wanted compliance. As I sat in the silence, memories resurfaced sharper now. Nights as a teenager when Melissa took my clothes without asking and wore them out, leaving me to face our mother's anger when they went missing. The way she'd whisper, "Don't tell or they'll say you're ungrateful." The time she sold my iPod to pay a bar tab, then told everyone I had lost it. Those were small thefts maybe, but they had taught me early that in our family, her entitlement always outweighed my rights. I had believed it was normal. I had believed love required me to stay silent. Last night had shattered that illusion. Watching her scream on the driveway caught on neighbors' phones, I realized the truth wasn't just mine anymore. The world had seen. The weight of secrecy had lifted. Still, the cost loomed heavy. My relationship with Melissa was in ruins, maybe beyond repair. My parents' disapproval burned like a scar. And yes, the house was quiet, so quiet that my footsteps echoed against the stone walls. Loneliness lingered, but it felt different than before. Not a prison, but an open field, wide, daunting, but free. I stood, walked out onto the patio, and let the breeze brush against my face. The oak trees rustled softly, unconcerned with human drama. The lake shimmered patient and eternal. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered aloud, "Better alone than erased." The words steadied me. That afternoon, I took steps I had once been too afraid to consider. I called a locksmith to change every lock on the villa. I scheduled a security company to install cameras. I even contacted a lawyer asking about restraining orders and formal letters of trespass. Each call was a declaration, each appointment a line drawn in stone. When evening fell, I lit a single candle in the kitchen, poured myself a modest glass of wine, the cheap kind, this time one I could savor without guilt. I toasted the empty room. It wasn't celebration exactly, but it was acknowledgement. The house was mine, and so was my voice. Later, lying in bed, I thought again about Melissa's sneer, the venom in her words. "Without us, you're nothing." I realized how wrong she was. Without them, I wasn't nothing. Without them, I was finally something. By the end of that week, the villa no longer felt like an exposed fortress waiting to be invaded. It began to feel like mine again, piece by piece, reclaimed with deliberate choices. The locksmith came first, arriving in a white van with a toolbox that clinked with each step. I followed him from door to door, watching him remove old locks and replace them with new ones that glinted under the sunlight. When he handed me a fresh set of keys, cool and sharp in my palm, I felt something stir in my chest, a quiet but steady power. The next day, a security team arrived. They walked the perimeter, pointing to corners where cameras should go, measuring the angles to cover the driveway, the patio, the back entrance by the pool. I signed the papers, and by evening, small black cameras blinked quietly, watching over what I had fought for. Their silent presence was a reassurance. If Melissa ever tried to return, if she ever thought to test me again, I would have evidence, not just my word against hers. That night, I sat at my desk in the office, the one her friend had once mocked as perfect for a closet. The corkboard still displayed my sketches, though some pages bore faint creases from careless hands. I smoothed them out gently, pinning them back into place. Then I drafted a letter with my lawyer's help, a formal notice of trespass addressed to Melissa. The words were clinical, stripped of emotion. She was no longer permitted on the property, and any further attempts to enter would result in immediate legal action. My lawyer assured me it was enforceable, and he would send it by certified mail. For the first time, boundaries existed not just in my heart, but in ink backed by law. When the letter left my hands, so did a weight I hadn't realized I carried. I had always feared the day I might have to put something in writing, as if making it official would brand me a traitor to my family. But instead of guilt, I felt relief. It wasn't betrayal. It was survival. Days passed. I cleaned each room, reclaiming them from the memory of strangers' laughter. I burned candles to chase away the sour scent of spilled alcohol, laundered every towel, scrubbed the wine stain from the counter until it gleamed. Slowly, the villa stopped echoing with their voices and began to echo with mine. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the lake, I carried a glass of wine out to the patio. I settled into a chair, watching the sky blaze with streaks of orange and purple. For the first time since moving in, I allowed myself to imagine the future. Dinner parties with friends I trusted, quiet mornings sketching while the lake shimmered, maybe even building a life here with someone who valued respect instead of exploitation. My phone buzzed again, another message from my parents. This time it wasn't anger, it was pleading. "Emily, can't you just forgive her? Family is family. She's ashamed, but she's still your sister." I stared at the words for a long time before setting the phone aside. Forgiveness wasn't the issue. Boundaries were. And I had learned the hard way that forgiveness without boundaries was just permission for the same wound to be reopened. I whispered aloud as if the house itself needed to hear it. "I'm not going back." The walls seemed to hold the words to affirm them. Later, as dusk deepened, I walked the halls with a quiet certainty. This villa wasn't just a house. It was the physical proof of my resilience. It was the line I had drawn, the promise that I would no longer be erased by someone else's entitlement. I locked each door with my new keys, checked the soft blink of the security cameras, and let a small smile spread across my face. Standing at the window, the lake reflecting the last of the fading light, I finally felt what I had wanted all along. Not wealth, not status, but dignity. And dignity, I realized, was worth more than any family tie that demanded my silence. When I look back now, I realize the villa was never just about walls, windows, and lake views. It was about everything I had built in silence, every late night spent working when no one noticed, every dream I had kept alive when my family told me to be practical. Every small victory I celebrated alone. Melissa tried to turn it into a monument of entitlement proof that she could still take from me. But by standing up that night, I turned it into something else, a boundary carved in stone. I won't pretend it was easy. In the weeks after my parents stopped calling except for clipped guilt-laced voicemails, "You'll regret pushing family away. One day you'll be sorry for being so cold." And Melissa. She vanished from my phone, but not from whispers. Mutual acquaintances told me she spun new stories painting herself as the victim of my cruelty. Maybe once I would have rushed to defend myself, desperate to be believed. But now I didn't need to. The videos, the witnesses, the truth, those spoke louder than I ever could. And in the quiet, I began to learn something my younger self never understood. Being alone isn't the same as being abandoned. Alone is the space where you hear your own voice clearly without it being drowned out by demands and manipulation. Alone is where healing begins. I started new routines, morning coffee on the patio, sketchbook in hand, the lake still and silver under the rising sun. Evening walks around the neighborhood where a few neighbors now waved kindly, murmuring things like, "Good for you," or "Took courage what you did." For years, I had dreaded judgment, but now judgment had turned into quiet respect. Sometimes late at night, I replayed Melissa's last words in the driveway, "You'll regret being alone in that big, empty house." And every time I found myself smiling, because what she thought was a curse had become my blessing. Better an empty house than one filled with people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to drain. To those of you listening, maybe you've been there too. Maybe not with a villa or a sister barging in, but with family members who think your success belongs to them, who twist love into obligation, who call you selfish the moment you say no. I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me years ago. Setting boundaries isn't betrayal. Protecting what you've built isn't cruelty, and silence isn't peace if it costs you your dignity. Yes, you may lose people. I did. But the ones you lose are the ones who only stayed because they could take. What you gain is harder to describe. It's not loud or flashy. It's quiet. It's the peace of locking your door at night and knowing it's truly your home. It's the strength of looking in the mirror and not flinching at your reflection. It's the dignity of saying enough and meaning it. The villa stands today as more than property. It's a reminder that I am not powerless, that family doesn't mean surrender, and that love without respect isn't love at all. And though my parents may never understand, though Melissa may never change, I do not regret the choice I made. I regret only that it took me so long. So if you're listening to this wherever you are, maybe sitting in your kitchen or driving home from work, I want you to ask yourself whose voice is louder in your life, yours or the people who keep taking. And if it's not yours, maybe it's time to change that. As for me, I sit here tonight on the patio candle flickering beside me, the lake calm and endless under the stars. My villa isn't empty. It's full of something Melissa never understood: peace, freedom, and the steady heartbeat of a life lived on my own terms. And that, I've learned, is worth everything.